Hare Krishna Govinda Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Shraminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharini Nirvisesa Sindhivadi Paschati Dasatarini Umagyana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuru Meditamyena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Shayam Upagadamayam Darati Shapadanti. So, welcome everyone. It is evening for you in Australia. It is morning for us in Amsterdam. Well, not morning, 11 o'clock. And we've been very spontaneous about these classes lately. And so I asked Sundari Radha what to talk about, and she had spoken with Amrita Radhika, and they've come up with a question which I will attempt to answer bit by bit. It's a long question, and so I'm just going to read it, and then wow, yeah, I'm just going to read it, and then we'll discuss it. And I just got a new phone, and we're testing that. We're broadcasting on the new phone. I don't know if it looks better or sounds better, but it's easier to use. It's smaller. It's supposed to have a better camera. Anyway, so here's the question. The challenge. This is the challenge. Our Krishna consciousness becomes challenged by material anxieties or worries. These anxieties are caused by our previous choices. Hold on, everyone. Wow. We're going to record this on a recorder, and we just got an adapter. Well, Chandra has just shown up with an adapter. So we can record audio also. The connection is weak. I hope we don't lose connection here. So, our Krishna consciousness becomes challenged. Our Krishna consciousness becomes challenged at the moment where we feel, by material anxiety or worries, which are the result of our previous choices. And then they're fully upon us, and they must be dealt with. And we face it, but at the same time, how not to allow ourselves to go on the material platform with anxiety where it affects Krishna consciousness. I'm not sure if you're saying it's both anxiety, but is it exasperated because you created the problem? It's not a problem that was just circumstantial, but you created the problem and now you're experiencing the result of the problem. So is that, Amrita, you can answer, is that why it's so difficult to deal with it? Because you're facing a problem you've created? Or you're just talking in general that you sometimes, when anxiety hits a certain level or stress hits, so you're dealing with, it gets worse because it's your own problem. Okay. You're finally getting the results of what you're eating, your own cooking, and you don't like the way it tastes. Yeah. Past karma we've created, yeah. Okay. We allow ourselves to go on a material platform with anxiety where it affects our Krishna consciousness and sadhana. Is it possible to have a class on this topic? How to remain steady in Krishna consciousness when feeling overwhelmed with material responsibility that must be dealt with, and without getting in a state of anxiety where japa is distracted, etc. Quality goes down. So this is the problem. Some action is required, but how to avoid that state of mind that just makes everything more difficult? like the anxiety is an indulgence, allowing yourself to feel helpless rather than focusing on the opportunities. Personally, I feel like indulging in the anxiety. It's a system I've set up to not hear the call of Krishna and his direction. How best to serve him? Use intelligence to improve. Okay. So how do we maintain strength in Krishna consciousness and not let material problems overtake us? So, there's different ways. There's different ways we can discuss this. And one, I think, for you is quite personal, and it may be personal for other people. And then what you're saying and your response is when there's a problem you can't deal with, your response is indulgence, like whatever that means. Chocolate, television, depression, hide in your room, lock the door. People have different ways of responding. So, and then the general question is, I would say, is how we just respond to situations which are causing us anxiety, but we created them. And so answering how not to get on the mental platform. Well, there's two ways of answering this. There's a generic answer, and there's more specific answer to deal with the emotional side of it. But maybe the generic answer would solve the emotional side of it. The first thing, my initial gut response when anyone presents to me a situation in which they're not responding in a Krishna conscious way to stress or difficulty or problems, just as an objective observer, my gut response is that that's the time you're supposed to have more Krishna consciousness, or that's the time you're supposed to take more shelter of Krishna. So a lot of times devotees say, well, stress hits a certain threshold, they forget Krishna. It doesn't make sense to me. But I know it's a reaction a lot of devotees are having, and forgetting Krishna means, I'm assuming, because this is what you're saying, that the response is to take shelter in something other than Krishna, which to me means kind of running away from everything. And it sounds like what you're saying is like, instead of taking in shelter in Krishna, I take shelter in sense gratification. Is that what you're saying? Like the stress is so high, I'm going to relieve the stress with potato chips rather than the Maha Mantra, or chocolate rather than the Maha Mantra, or internet surfing rather than the Maha Mantra, or what else? Well, most devotees don't take drugs. Sports, workaholism. Some people it's sex. Well, Amrita, is an interesting thing, because I just got a letter the other day. Devotees having problems with regulative principles, and he said the problems. He never had the problem, but he hit a point of frustration in his life, and he was so frustrated that the problem developed as in his view, just as a means of dealing with the anxiety that he was going through, or the stress, or whatever the problem was. I don't know exactly how he was experiencing a problem, but it was a lot of frustration going on in dealing with other devotees, and he resorted to doing something he shouldn't be doing as a way of coping. So it was sense gratification became the way of coping. So Amrita Radhika says, for me personally, it's when I'm on Sankirtan. Right now I get on the mental platform because I'm focused on making money, not surrendering. So therefore I don't collect money because I'm focused on making. See more. There's more to be seen. No? There's no more to be seen. Maybe there's... Looks like making money rather than being... Okay. Right, this is a multifaceted question which we could answer in different ways. So, I'll answer this, but I'll continue with the other answer because it's on my mind now. the answer of, we're talking about stress and anxiety, or talk about whatever it is that would push you into Maya, the situation. So when stress and anxiety hits a certain level, or frustration hits a certain level, one response that we could have is sense gratification. And sense gratification is just a means of forgetting the problem or numbing the problem, basically. Right now, for devotees, sense gratification may not be very big, but it's a symptom of what could become big if you're not careful. Because when people have big problems, they tend to respond in the same way to avoid the problem. And one of the ways to avoid the problem is just work 15 hours a day, or, like Nirmala Chandra was saying, go crazy with sports, or go crazy with anything. You just absorb yourself in something so you don't have to deal with the problem, right? Now, as I was saying before, for us it really doesn't make sense, because sense gratification is not a solution. It's only a numbing. It's a temporary relief, right? So sense gratification is never a solution. But like what Prabhupada said, for us, sense gratification is like a little salt. You need a little salt to make the preparation taste good. So sense gratification for us is only meant to create balance in our life. And so when you engage in sense gratification beyond that level of balance, then it's kind of like we're saying, I'm looking for shelter, or I'm looking for happiness, I'm looking for something in gratifying my senses, instead of looking towards Krishna for it. So it doesn't make sense, obviously. And it's counterintuitive if you think about it, because Krishna is the only shelter. Chocolate is not the only shelter, at least not according to Shastra. You might think it is, but it's not. Television is not the shelter. Overeating is not the shelter. So instead of running towards Krishna as a solution, we run towards sense gratification. It doesn't make sense, does it? Right. Yes. So, the reason that this is so interesting to me is because so many devotees have written me with this problem, that when things get difficult, like some people will stop chanting their rounds, which doesn't make any sense, does it? Things are really difficult, so I stop chanting Hare Krishna. How does that supposed to make sense? It's an emotional reaction. Things are difficult, I lose faith, I lose my desire, I'm just stressed out, I can't chant. Which we could, of course, turn that around and say, well, when you're stressed out, that's when you're supposed to chant. Right? So it's an interesting phenomena that's going on, that people are finding either shelter in sense gratification or becoming so disgusted with themselves or so caught up in the material that they don't even look to Krishna as a solution anymore, or they don't want to do it, or they've kind of uprooted their desire to do it. Okay, so then Amrita's, Radhika's problem is being focused on getting a result and not getting the result, and the more she doesn't get the result, the more she's focused on the result, and the more she doesn't get the result because she's focused on the result, and the more she doesn't get the result, the more she focuses on the result, and thereby gives up her Krishna consciousness to focus on the result and doesn't get any. And it sounds like an interesting trick of Maya. I think the answer to this question and all of these questions lies in the where we look for shelter and how we get it. And I don't know, when I read the question, one of the things that struck me, and I don't know if this is absolutely correct, but I've always trained myself that when there's difficulty, when there's distress, the first option is Hey Krishna, not hey chocolate. That's just how I was always trained as a devotee. We had to do Sankirtan in very difficult situations, and it wasn't resolved by eating ice cream. It was resolved by, okay, we have to chant better rounds. That was just our programming. That's how we were trained from the beginning. So now today, when devotees are telling me that sometimes their immediate response is to take shelter in sense gratification, I see, well, there's a big difference going on here from how we were trained. I don't want to really say how we were trained. That was just the philosophy. That everything in our books is pushing us towards taking shelter of Krishna when we're in distress. So maybe we have to reorient ourselves a little bit to this attitude that a natural response to difficulty is, Krishna, please help me. Now, perhaps our training was like that is because practically all of us were doing things we weren't qualified to do. Like as you know, I was temple president at a very early age, as were many of my godbrothers, but all of us were taking on responsibilities, and very few of us had much qualification. Some had no qualification at all. So that was the mood of those days, that you didn't need qualification, you just needed put your hands up in the air and say, hey Govinda, and he would guide you to do the service. So, our very existence was pretty much at the edge, that everything we were doing was pretty much at the edge. Like we didn't really know what was going to happen from day to day. And that's how we live. So I think probably that's why we developed this natural aptitude that whenever there's trouble or difficulty, we just turn to Krishna. And the faith came from that, because Krishna would help us. So that's my first answer, that somehow or other we have to train ourselves when there's distress, when there's difficulty. The first option is not sense gratification, but the first option is Krishna help. It's prayer, it's better japa, it's going to Prabhupada's books, it's looking for solutions in Sangha, wherever we can find them, that's the first option. So it seems like today that's not always the first option anymore. Self-indulgence or self-pity might be an option. Or, self-indulgence, self-pity, or just it sounds like what you're saying also is becoming numb by the anxiety and just kind of not knowing how to deal with it. I think another thing that will help is attachment to the service rather than to the result of the service. So my personal experience, having done Sankirtan for many, 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 many years, in many, many situations, is that when I was attached to the service and not attached to how many books I would distribute, it created a detachment. And when people picked up on my detachment, they'd always take the book and give me money. It's like, Amrita, if I said, okay, today I'm giving you 50 Bhagavad Gitas, you can give them out free, and it doesn't matter how much money you get or don't get, because they're already paid for. And so you go out with these books, and you give them out to people and say, here, these books are free, you can take one, and if you want, you give a donation. You probably would collect more than you normally do, because you don't need to. And that kind of detachment, people pick up on, and I think it's also the best way to succeed is to have some degree of detachment. So you just want the people to have the book, and you don't care about the money because you don't need it. At least that's my experience. And those of us who could do Sankirtan in somewhat of a detached way, which means we were just attached to doing the service, we always did better than when we were too attached to getting a result. But then you might say, well, shouldn't I be attached to distributing books? You should, but that's different from being attached to the result. So, yeah. Yeah. The solution I find whenever a devotee is in anxiety about service and about results is to go back to the consciousness with which we do service, which is to please Krishna, and then we do it sincerely and we do our best. That always seems to rid ourselves of the anxiety. You know the way life is. Like one day everything goes really well, and you're really fired up, and everything falls into place. And then the next day everything goes wrong. You ever have a day like that? Like everything is right. You get emails and messages about this is happening, that's happening, this is going forward. And the next day, messages, he quit, he can't do it, this came out wrong. You have that? Yeah. So what do? We're attached to the service. It's okay, I'm not the controller. I think, Amrita, I think Krishna's just trying to teach you you're not the controller. That's all. That's all he's trying to teach you. And as soon as you learn that lesson, you'll collect oodles and bundles and buckets of money. But until you're in that consciousness, he won't let you do it. Because if you think, hey, I'm number one, I can do it, I'm good, then he'll say, ha 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 ha, no you're not, and I'll show you you're not. And as soon as you understand that everything that happens is by his mercy, and you go out praying for his mercy, and detached, then all of a sudden you'll meet the nicest people in Sydney, and the richest ones, and the most generous ones. And if you go out in the wrong consciousness, you'll meet all the misers and nasty at the same time. I'm just speaking about my own experience on Sankirtan, that devotees who were in the wrong consciousness always met the wrong people. Devotees in the right consciousness always met the right people. And they were standing next to one another. It was the same city on the same street corner, or the same airport, the same terminal. And one would meet all nasty people, and one would meet all nice people. I don't know if you have experience of that, but I have tons of experience of that. It happens all the time. So there's a reason. It's the consciousness. So, yes. Isn't it funny how it's so hard to learn the lessons that are in our books? That we're not the controller? So, yeah. But what I would say is that Amrita Radhika, when she said is, then she'd get frustrated with herself and self-pity and all that. But what you have to understand from that is that's a global, I would assume that's a global reaction that you'll have to any stress or difficulty. Not just book distribution, but anything which you can't control, that you'll react that the same way, I would assume, more or less, right? So that's another lesson to learn. Like a lot of times when we're reacting to a situation, we think, well, it's this situation, and this situation has caused me to react this way. But in most cases, it's not true. It's just a way that we react in general, not to this one situation, but to all situations. It's just that this is the situation we're dealing with now, so we think this situation is causing me to react this way. But when you say, I go into self-pity, or I beat myself up, or whatever it was you said, to me, that's just a global reaction to any difficulty that you would run into. And so that's how you're responding, and that's your solution to it. So, we have to learn how to make better solutions. Better solution is like this. Hey Govinda. Right? Then the difficulty makes you Krishna conscious. Otherwise, the difficulty makes you take shelter of sense gratification. Right? True or false? Anuradha, I think audio and video is working for everybody else. So maybe, something's not connected. Sorry there. Small accident. We're trying to hold whoops. I'm going to have to move this. We don't have a proper holder for the phone. Why did you do it before? Okay, it's balancing. Yeah. This is okay. Now I have to sit up. This is an interesting phenomenon which a lot of people don't know. In one of our workshops, we ask a question. In the forgiveness workshop, we ask the question. Well, if at the end of the workshop you don't forgive, what excuse you're going to make? So, well, if I don't forgive, then there wasn't enough time, or I needed a female teacher, or, my issue is deeper than others, or, you can't just forgive, it takes time, it's a gradual process. You'll have some reason. Not that you intend not to give, but it's just an exercise that if you didn't, what reason would you give? And so what we find out is that the reason that everybody gives, if at the end of the workshop they wouldn't forgive, is the same reason they give for anything that they fail in. So it's not about forgiveness, it's good to know, right? Well, everything takes time, you can't rush it. And so then we ask the question, does this excuse come up in other areas of your life? And then most everyone realizes, yeah, I use that same excuse for everything. So we have universal ways of responding. So how you're responding to the frustration on Sankirtan, I would suggest it's probably a universal way that you respond, or how anyone responds to any difficulty, I would suggest it's probably a universal way they respond to all difficulties and all stress and all anxiety. So that's good to know, isn't it? Yeah. Feels out of control. Trying to read this. Hold on. Don't press the panic button. Press the mantra button. I forgot that I said that, but if I said it, sounds good to me. Okay, I have to read some of these. Some of your comments. Okay, hold on. I feel like it's an impulse or compulsion to become absorbed in anxiety with finances because I have family responsibility, when I know full well it doesn't help or change anything. It's just a program. It's just a program playing out. It says see more, and I can't see more. Hold on. I hate to point my finger at you, but I'm just... I have family when I know full well it doesn't help or change anything, so I understand this is the same as Amrita. I'm not the controller. And I try to focus more when I'm chanting. Hold on. Okay, there's another aspect of this discussion that could help, which is not the psychological aspect, but let me just finish up with the psychological aspect, at least for now, is that whatever you see in yourself, most likely is just kind of a universal way you've learned, before you were a devotee, to respond to these problems and their blueprints. And so, in Sundari Radha, in your case, there might be all kinds of money blueprints in there, views about money that are affecting your anxiety, past experiences with money and so forth. So that all comes together, and then it forms this blueprint, and then the blueprint comes out in these situations. So it's good to know that. It's kind of, it's just this combination of things. And in that sense, that really doesn't have anything to do with our Krishna consciousness per se. It just has to do with our conditioning, our beliefs, our blueprints, and we're just letting them reign instead of Krishna consciousness. Now, one way to look at this situation is that to understand that everything we're doing is meant to make us Krishna conscious. And so what you're saying here is, it's not making you Krishna conscious, it's actually taking you away from it. And so it doesn't make any sense. So let's go back to some basic concepts. Human life is meant for becoming Krishna conscious, right? This life, the only purpose in this life, it's not to make money, it's not to have a big house, a big car. We may have all these things. That's not the goal, that's not the purpose. Within the context of existing in this world, with the house, with the car, with the family, with all this, our focus, our goal is to be Krishna conscious, and we would not and should not allow anything to get in the way. So that's the premise, right? So now, I'm trying to work, make a living, you're trying to work, make a living, we're all trying to work, make a living, but what's the goal? What's the goal? So you might say, well, the goal is to be financially secure. It's not the goal. The goal is to be Krishna conscious. All our work is meant to make us Krishna conscious, ultimately. So we always have to remember, why am I doing anything, ultimately? Srivas would clap his hands. If he didn't get enough to eat, he was going to kill himself, jump in the Ganga. That's faith, yes. So, when you exist in that paradigm, that, human life, my life, every human being's life is meant to be Krishna conscious, and anything that gets in the way is getting in the way. It's not purposeful, like, why should I do something if the result is it doesn't make me Krishna conscious? So, allowing yourself to get hung up about something to the point where you forget Krishna, from this perspective, doesn't make any sense at all. And if we forget priorities, what the priority is, then these things will happen naturally. We'll just get an anxiety about this, and we'll allow that anxiety to infiltrate into our japa. And, the whole point is to chant purely. So, it's about putting things in perspective. And then what Krishna Kirtan is saying, there's also this aspect of faith. That I'm a devotee, have a little more faith, and Krishna will take care of you if you have a little more faith. Sometimes we say, Krishna, why aren't you taking care of me? And if you could hear Krishna, he'd say, well, why don't you have faith that I will take care of you? You're saying, Krishna, please take care of me. You have this little cup. You think, well, that's all he'll give me. Well, Krishna's saying, well, just have a bigger cup. I'll put more in it. But you don't have faith that I'll do it. So now you're stressing about how you're going to exist, and you have this little cup of faith. So have a bigger cup of faith. I can put more into it. Sometimes you have to put yourself out on the edge a little bit before Krishna says, okay, I see your faith. You went out on the edge a little bit. I see your faith here. I'm going to help you. And Prabhupada said that, you're propagating, you're making propaganda for Krishna. He'll pay your salary. So that's a faith. And I think a lot of the mistake we make is say, well, Krishna, pay my salary first, then I'll have faith. And Krishna's saying, have faith, then I'll pay your salary. And then the salary doesn't get paid because we're waiting for him to pay it before we can have faith. Right? Yeah, so that's the idea. So, Krishna, pay my salary. Krishna, work, then I'll pay. No, you pay first, then I'll work. No, work, and then I'll pay. We don't want to work. We want him to, we want that salary to give us the faith. But it works the other way around. Okay, I'll go out on a limb, and then Krishna will say, oh, you're out on a limb, I have to save you. But you're not out on a limb, so I don't have to save you. Yeah, that's the idea. Yeah. Does that make sense? So I think it's a mindset about Krishna. Does it normally get the feeling to give up? No work, no more paying bills, etc. Yeah, but it's not Krishna conscious. It's coming from a weakness. You see that, I think, okay, let's take this to another level of discussion. What's happening for a lot of us is our daily lives are not ideal. We're working in the material world. We're associating with people who aren't devotees. We're not in an ideal environment. So some of the problems we have are existing within that bad environment. And it's not ideally the way a devotee should be living and be in. And so we're kind of confronted with realities that Vaishnavas shouldn't really have to deal with. 100, 200 years ago, you'd be a Vaishnava in India and you just, walk down the street and go to your little village factory and make something or sell something and then go home at night and work like 6 hours and, live simply. But we don't have that. So now we're confronted with all these complicated situations. Monetary stress, I think, is higher now than any time I've ever lived. The economies are so, I don't even know what the word is. Just the cost of living has gone up so much more quickly than the wages. And, living now is twice as expensive as it was in the 70s, or 3 times. Not just dollars, I don't mean it costs twice as much more numerically, but the value of the money and the cost of the home and the car and the food and the amount of money we're making. It's much more difficult to live now. So we're living in this environment which is quite antagonistic to living peacefully. So the feeling of wanting to quit and give up, yeah, it's naturally there because we're not in situations that are conducive to our Krishna consciousness. So now the challenge is twofold. All right, how can I be Krishna conscious in that situation? Or do I want to stay in that situation? And what's the alternative? Move to Mayapur, move to Vrindavan, move to a devotee community. There's not a whole lot of alternatives. So if there's not alternatives and we need to stay in the city and work, then somehow or other we're going to have to be extremely dharmic and do it because it's the right thing to do. And we have families to maintain and so on. And that's what's expected of us. And the challenge that we all have is how to be Krishna conscious in these environments which are not conducive to being Krishna conscious. It's a reality. It's just the way the world is. And that's what we have to deal with. So the advantage of dealing with it is it'll make you stronger if you can succeed. It'll make you a wiser person because you've understood how to deal with it. But the liability is you could crash under it because if you don't have good sadhana and you're in this situation, you could crash under it. So the saving grace is good sadhana and have service, have some regular service you're doing to hold on to. And a lot of praying to Krishna to give you intelligence. See, the thing also is, when you see yourself falling into some kind of sense gratification or frustration or whatever it is you're experiencing, instead of taking shelter of Krishna, at that time you should pray for intelligence, how to deal with it. But I think a lot of what's happening is it's like if you're used to giving into your senses, then you'll be used to giving into your emotions. It's like becomes your blueprint. When things get rough, you give in some way, either sensually or emotionally. So we need to do a reprogramming, give in. Have to give in to Krishna. That's where we immediately have to go to take shelter. Like if you have a problem, first thing you should go to is Prabhupada's books, or to your japa beads. Not to sense gratification, not to self-pity, not to anger or frustration. And then, in in the question, you were saying part of the frustration is that I'm suffering because of my own actions. I'm doing the wrong thing and I'm frustrated. And that's definitely true. But the thing to understand is, until you stop doing that, you're going to suffer. And so it's wise to learn how to stop doing that. Just by realizing that that's a tendency, and if I don't do something about that tendency, the tendency will continue. And I'll have to spend my whole life as a split person, a divided person, who knows what to do but reacts in the wrong way. And to me, that's one of the greatest impetuses to get over our problems, is just realizing that if I don't, I have to live with myself. And nobody likes living with themselves. Wow. Nobody likes living with themselves when they're a divided person, right? So I think that's a powerful realization. At least it's one that empowers me a lot to be Krishna conscious, because if I'm not, then I have to live with a self that is not doing what Prabhupada wants me to do, and I'm the one who has to deal with it, and it's painful. And so what's the result of having to deal with that? In this case that we're talking about, the result of dealing with that is I just fall apart. So it doesn't make sense. It's not smart, it's not useful. And the goal of Krishna consciousness is to someday, 24 hours, be Krishna conscious. So we can't avoid doing this. We have to do it. It's just a question of when we're going to do it. Right? You agree? And that's another thing that empowers me. I've talked about this before. I don't know if you've heard it, but yesterday in the forgiveness workshop, I was explaining to the devotees that whatever challenges you have in this life, if you don't resolve them, you'll have them in the next. So, if you just want to say, I can't deal with it, I can't face it, you will face it, but it may not be in this lifetime. The same problem is going to be there. So then you'll just have to deal with it in another life. And so understanding that, obviously it makes sense to deal with it now. And the sooner you deal with it, the more quickly you get over it. And then you don't have to carry it around with you anymore. So that can serve as great impetus to just understand that, if I don't deal with this, I have to carry this with me. And who knows how long I'm going to carry it. But I'm carrying it. So, just meditate on that fact, that whatever it is that you need to work on, if you don't, you're just going to carry it another day, and you'll have to suffer from it another day. So Guru Nishna says, my experience has been that when I have these stress, panic situations, I read Bhagavad Gita, I listen to lectures by Prabhupada. Situation doesn't change, but I breathe through these moments. I like that. I breathe through these moments. Sounds poetic, Guru Nishna. I breathe through these moments. That's a good line for a song. Yeah. As I often have said, if you don't like anxiety, you're living in the wrong place. Now, don't forget, we left Vaikuntha. Vaikuntha means no anxiety, and we came here. So now to complain about anxiety, give me a break. This is the world of anxiety, and we left the world of no anxiety. So don't complain that there's anxiety here, because this is the world of anxiety, and we have chosen to come here. So it's just the reality. It doesn't solve the problem, but it enables us to accept it. Nobody likes anxiety, nobody likes stress. It's all around us, but we chose to come to a world that's full of stress. And the other paradox is that most of the stress that we're experiencing, we created. And now we're complaining about the stress. And we created it for ourselves. So, yeah, it doesn't make sense. And the third thing that doesn't make sense is the process of Krishna consciousness is the solution, and to not take shelter of it as a solution, but to take shelter of sense gratification makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It's like you have Bhagavad Gita, that's the solution to your problems, and instead of reading Bhagavad Gita, you watch a stupid television show as a solution to overcome your misery. What sense is there in that? It's, as Prabhupada said, because you're a devotee, it's even more foolish because you know the solution. So if you're not a devotee and you're just bathing in TV overdoses because you're miserable, that's one thing. But you have Bhagavad Gita and it's sitting on your shelf collecting dust and you're watching television, that really makes no sense. Does it? Hare Krishna. The world, it's just created to entrap us. And this is another way we become entrapped. You could answer this question also by saying we lack a taste and faith in the holy name, and so we're not taking shelter in the holy name. We're taking shelter in something else. So maybe the simplest answer and simplest solution is take more shelter in the holy name whenever there's distress. That should be your natural response. And or read. That should be your natural response. Now, I want to get back to Amrita Radhika's need to do her service without desire to get any particular result. And try to see the service as the means for you to be Krishna conscious. And everything's about the service, everything's about the attitude, everything's about the motive, and nothing's about the result. Just go out with the right attitude. So if you go out and focus on, now you're focusing on the result. So tomorrow when you go out, what I'd like you to do is focus on the attitude. All these people don't have Krishna, they need Krishna. My service is to give them Krishna. I just want to introduce them to Krishna. And my duty is just to make this effort for Prabhupada, be sincere, do my best. That's where you put your focus. And then let what happens happen. And the world will go on. Don't worry, you'll survive. Krishna will take care of you. So let what happens happen, but don't allow yourself to focus on the wrong thing. And then you'll be blissful. You see, you can't be successful in Sankirtan if you're not blissful. So if you're in anxiety about money, everyone who contacts you is going to be in anxiety also about their money. They're not going to give it to you. If you're in anxiety to get their money, they're in anxiety to hold on to it. So when you're enjoying the service, when you're focused on appreciating the service, the mentality, the gratefulness for having the service, then everything changes. Right? So now let's be grateful for the anxiety when it comes. You know that story when such a funny story. Devotees wanted to buy this big temple in Toronto, and it was so expensive. And Prabhupada said, don't buy it because you'll just be buying anxiety, because you'll have such a big overhead in the big temple. You'll be buying anxiety. And Prabhupada said, we don't want to buy anxiety. Anyway, Prabhupada, he heard about the temple, they described it, and after he heard, it was a beautiful building, good location, he said, when they told him the price, he said, no, we don't want to buy anxiety. So, shortly after, I believe he had come to Toronto. This is where the temple was. And so the temple president kind of put it to rest that Prabhupada didn't want them to buy it. And then Prabhupada came and he said, so what about the temple? Prabhupada said, you want to see it? And the Prabhupada said, yeah, I want to see it. So they went and Prabhupada saw it and he really liked it. How much are they asking? This, that, and the next thing. So, Prabhupada said, so, you'll get it. And he already put it to rest because Prabhupada said, we don't want to buy anxiety. And he said, so he answered to Prabhupada, he said, no, Prabhupada, it's too expensive, we don't want to buy anxiety. That was his answer. And Prabhupada said, there must be anxiety for Krishna. If there's not anxiety, then just sleep, something like that, So he completely switched it around, he was in a different mood. So, Sundari Radha, I'll give you my realization of anxiety. This is a blissful realization, and it's helped me in times when I didn't know how things were going to work out. So I would think, anxiety in Krishna's service is wanted. And if I'm not in anxiety for Krishna's service, I'm going to be in anxiety for my service. So I would think the anxiety is okay because it's for Krishna. That's why I'm in anxiety. And if I was not Krishna conscious, I would just be in anxiety about getting sense gratification. So if this anxiety is for Krishna, then I'm fortunate. I just feel fortunate that it's for Krishna and it's not for me. And so, you have various anxieties, but really, if you look at your anxieties, a lot of them are because you're trying to do devotional service. You wouldn't have these so-called anxieties if you just weren't a devotee. You'd have that whole part of your life. You'd have more time. You wouldn't be worried about the conditioned souls, preaching, and where you're going to live, and getting your son in the right school. None of these things would be big issues. So a lot of our anxieties are because we're devotees, isn't it? So if I wouldn't have the anxiety for Krishna, I'd have it for Maya. Better I have it for Krishna, and Krishna appreciates it. So that's one thought. And then, of course, naturally there's another thought. Are those anxieties really anxieties, or am I just creating anxiety or seeing them as anxiety when they're not? Are they unnecessarily anxieties? Yeah. So, anxiety for Krishna is blissful. And, the thing is, if you're going to spread Krishna consciousness, you better be ready for anxiety. Or I like my life, right? I could just stay in one place, do some business and, make tons of money and do no preaching. And, no anxiety, just, get some job somewhere, make some money. But that's not the mission, When you want to make other people Krishna conscious, you will take on anxiety. That's the nature of it, right? And we all want to do service, and so we're all busy, but within our busy days, we're doing more service. Look at the anxiety Prabhupada took on to come to America. So, that's just the nature of a preacher. They take on anxiety. And Prabhupada took on a lot of anxiety. There were times in his preaching mission that he was experiencing extreme anxiety about how things would go on. But he didn't complain. He never complained. Sundari Radha says, my anxiety is blended family with my service. Yeah. Well, they're one and the same for a devotee. Yeah, nothing's separate. Their service, their personal life, everything it's all interconnected. So, but the realization to take home is that if I wasn't a devotee, I would still have anxiety, but it would be all about how to get sense gratification and how to get more of it and better sense gratification, right? Because as you get older, you're going to want to get better and different sense gratification. So your anxiety will be like, how do I get more? Now I'm 35, I need a Mercedes, and no more Toyotas. The Toyota's causing me anxiety. Now I'm in anxiety to get the Mercedes because I should be moving up in the world. I should be progressing. Otherwise, I'll be considered a loser. So there'll always be an anxiety in some way in the material world if you're not a devotee. Right? So, Krishna anxiety is blissful. And, as Prabhupada said, if there's not Krishna anxiety, we'll just go to sleep. There'll be nothing to do. And even non-devotees have realized that anxiety often is, like say stress is bad. Well, they did an experiment and they took two groups of people who had the same exact job. And they told one group of people stress is good because stress gives you energy. It puts you on your toes. Like if you're not stressed, you're too laid back. So stress actually makes you work harder. Stress actually is good for you. It's healthy. It makes you feel better. Then they took another group and they told them stress is bad for you. And you don't work well when you're under stress and so on. And then they watched the two groups. And the group that was told stress is bad, you don't work well, was in anxiety and didn't work well. And the group that they told stress is good, it helps you, it puts you on the edge, you get more done. They got more done and they were happy. They weren't really stressed out. Isn't that interesting? So Prabhupada's saying anxiety is good because if you're in anxiety for Krishna, you're out of Maya. So that's why it's so, to me, so counterproductive when the anxiety in devotional service pushes us down into the mode of ignorance as a response. Whereas the response should be, hey Krishna, help me. And then that anxiety, it makes you more Krishna conscious. Right? And that's why I was saying in the beginning, for us as young devotees early in the movement, every day was, hey Krishna, help me, because I don't know how to do anything. And so that's how we lived. We lived on the edge, and everything worked out. And, we didn't have shelter and sense gratifications. We didn't even have the facility for sense gratification, even if we wanted. We didn't have any money. We didn't have anything. We were lucky we had prasadam. We were really poor. And so our only shelter was the holy name. And that's how we were trained. So I think any older devotee, you'll see them today, if they're stressed, they immediately, hey Govinda, that's just their natural response. Not to go into self-pity or sense gratification or workaholism or whatever. So let's just say anxiety is good when it's for Krishna. And a lot of times Prabhupada was giving us a lot to do when we were in anxiety, but generally he never said slow down. I think Prabhupada understood that we need to work hard, otherwise we'll get into trouble. So he didn't slow us down. He kept us going and kept pushing us. And I really sense he felt that if we weren't a little bit on the edge, we would just kind of get swept aside by Maya. So he kept us on the edge. And then he told the story how Bhaktisiddhanta kept his disciples on the edge. He had them collect money for a project, and then when he got the money, he spent it on another project. So then he said to them, okay, we need more money for this project. And they said, Guru Maharaj, we already collected the money. He said, no, I spent it on something else. So they're wondering why. And his idea was it's always good that we're in need, because it'll always keep you on the edge of working hard. Otherwise you become lazy. So you could say he created anxiety for his disciples, keep them on, just so they wouldn't take it easy. It was kind of an austerity that he imposed upon them. And austerity is good. So, anxiety is a kind of austerity. And if you take anxiety in Krishna's service, Krishna will be happy and he'll bless you in so many ways. Okay, I'll tell you a nice story. This is an amazing story. When I was in Mauritius in 1990 to 92, we had an installation. It was the second installation of the deities. The deities had been installed in one temple, and they were now being installed in the second temple later. And all I can say is, getting them into the second temple was intense. We were doing a marathon, and the temple president, he couldn't handle it. It was too intense, and so they had to put me as the temple president, who didn't want to be, just to make sure it happened. And I want to describe all the details. All I could say is high level anxiety, 24/7, all the time, to make it work. right to the day that they were installed and the day after we were having festivals. It was just intense, right? And there were points where, not that I would kill myself, but I was thinking at that point, if I died today, I wouldn't mind at all, because then I don't have to deal with all this anxiety. It was like, not that I was going to kill myself, but if the doctor said, you've just been bitten by a bug and in 24 hours you'll be dead, in that situation I would have said, thank God, I'm out of here. I mean, it was that bad. I'm serious. If I was to die in that situation, it would have been the easiest situation to die in, because it was so difficult. So much anxiety. And then we installed the deities. That was in August. And then September or October, I turned over my position. Because the deities were installed, we had constructed a temporary temple, and things were being managed, and I thought, okay, I've done my service, let me go. And so it was a service, as I said, that was full of anxiety. It was about a year of just really intense anxiety. And also including devotees fighting and walking out on me and taking sides for and against me. It was like a mess. So I went to India, and this amazing thing happened. Everything I was thinking of was happening. Like, I said, wouldn't it be nice to do this? And the devotee would show up, like, half hour later. Prabhu, we're going to do this. You want to come? It was like that. It was just like mystical. So for about, 6 months or so, it was like whatever I was thinking I would like to do, Krishna was arranging it. It was like mystically, like people were showing up. So Krishna was saying, thank you. I know you went through anxiety, and I just want to reward you. So just remember that He knows the anxiety you're going through. And He's got rewards for you. When He gives them, I'm not sure, but He's got them for you. And He appreciates that you're going through anxiety for Him. And He might keep you in anxiety if He thinks it's good for you. But I think in Amrita Kelly's situation, the anxiety is not necessary. In some situations, it is necessary because walls are caving down on us. But in Amrita Kelly's situation, is more of a self-created anxiety. So that's a different way of looking at this issue. I was assuming in Sundari's situation, I was making the assumption, maybe it's not true, but for the sake of discussion, making the assumption that it's just we're accepting service, and because of accepting the service, there's going to be anxiety. It's not self-created, it's just the nature of taking on certain services. There'll be a lot of anxiety, pressure, and so forth. So, and Krishna appreciates that. And but for Amrita, Krishna is teaching her that she has to focus on what's important. And always remember that everything we do is meant to make us Krishna conscious. That's the point. So, we're going to have somebody coming over here now who's going to show us how to use our new Canon D80, which, using it to me, looks like learning how to fly an airplane. So many dials and whistles and bells. And I don't even know how to use a camera. I forgot. Apertures and shutter speeds and ISO, and I forgot all about that. The last time I used a camera was in high school when I took a photography class. So we're going to learn, and then we're going to spend the day making some powerful videos for the world to learn about the work Sat was doing. So next Saturday I will be in Florence, and there's a good chance that I can broadcast. So we'll do our best. We'll keep you posted. And Hare Krishna to all of you. Thank you for listening. And Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Gaura, Gaura.